Section 49 of Popular Tales from the Norse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Patty Marie in Istanbul. Popular Tales from the Norse by Sir George Webb Dasent. Section 49. Lord Peter. Once upon a time was a poor couple, and they had nothing in the world but 3 sons. What names the 2 elder had I can't say, but the youngest was called Peter. So when their father and mother died, the sons were to share what was left, but there was nothing but a porridge pot, a griddle, and a cat. The eldest, who was to have the first choice, took the pot. For, said he, "Whenever I lend the pot to anyone to boil porridge, I can always get leave to scrape it." The second took the griddle. "For," said he, "whenever I lend it to anyone, I'll always get a morsel of dough to make a bannock." But the youngest had no choice left him. If he was to choose anything, it must be the cat. "Well," said he, "if I lend the cat to anyone, I shan't get much by that, for if Pussy gets a drop of milk, she'll want it all to herself. Still, I'd best take her along with me. I shouldn't like her to go about here and starve." So the brothers went out into the world to try their luck, and each took his own way. But when the youngest had gone a while, the cat said, "Now you shall have a good turn, because you wouldn't let me stay behind in the old cottage and starve. Now I'm off to the wood to lay hold of a fine fat head of game, and then you must go up to the king's palace that you see yonder, and say you are come with a little present for the king. And when he asks who sends it, you must say, 'Why, who should it be from but Lord Peter?'" Well, Peter hadn't waited long before the cat came back with a reindeer from the wood. She had jumped up on the reindeer's head between his horns and said, "If you don't go straight to the king's palace, I'll claw your eyes out." So the reindeer had to go, whether he liked it or no. And when Peter got to the palace, he went into the kitchen with the deer and said, "Here I'm come with a little present for the king, if he won't despise it." Then the king went out into the kitchen, and when he saw the fine plump reindeer, he was very glad. "But, my dear friend," he said, "who in the world is it that sends me such a fine gift?" "Oh," said Peter, "who should send it but Lord Peter?" "Lord Peter, Lord Peter," said the king, "pray tell me where he lives," for he thought it a shame not to know so great a man. But that was just what the lad wouldn't tell him. He daren't do it, he said, because his master had forbidden him. So the king gave him a good bit of money to drink his health, and bade him be sure and say all kind of pretty things and many thanks for the present to his master when he got home. Next day the cat went again into the wood, and jumped up on a red deer's head, and sat between his horns, and forced him to go to the palace. Then Peter went again into the kitchen, and said he was come with a little present for the king, if he would be pleased to take it. And the king was still more glad to get the red deer than he had been to get the reindeer, and asked again who it was that sent so fine a present. "Why, it's Lord Peter, of course," said the lad. But when the king wanted to know where Lord Peter lived, he got the same answer as the day before, and this day too he gave Peter a good lump of money to drink his health with. The third day the cat came with an elk, And so when Peter got into the palace kitchen and said he had a little present for the king if he'd be pleased to take it, the king came out at once into the kitchen, and when he saw the grand big elk, he was so glad he scarcely knew which leg to stand on. And this day, too, he gave Peter many more dollars, at least 100. He wished now, once for all, to know where this Lord Peter lived, and asked about this thing and that, but the lad said he daren't say, for his master's sake, who had strictly forbidden him to tell. "Well then," said the king, "beg Lord Peter to come and see me." Yes, the lad would take that message. But when Peter got out into the yard and met the cat, he said, "A pretty scrape you've got me into now, for here's the king who wants me to come and see him, and you know I've nothing to go in but these rags I stand and walk in." "Oh, don't be afraid about that," said the cat. "In 3 days you shall have a coach and horses and fine clothes, so fine that the gold falls from them, and then you may go and see the king very well. But mind, whatever you see in the king's palace, you must say that you have far finer and grander things in your own. Don't forget that." No, no, Peter would bear that in mind, never fear. So when 3 days were over, the cat came with a coach and horses and clothes, and all that Peter wanted, and altogether it was as grand as anything you ever set eyes on. So off he set, and the cat ran alongside the coach. The king met him well and graciously, but whatever the king offered him, and whatever he showed him, Peter said 'twas all very well, but he had far finer and better things in his own house. The king seemed not quite to believe this, but Peter stuck to what he said, and at last the king got so angry he couldn't bear it any longer. "Now I'll go home with you," he said, "and see if it be true what you've been telling me, that you have far finer and better things of your own. But if you've been telling a pack of lies, heaven help you, that's all I say." "Now you've got me into a fine scrape," said Peter to the cat, "for here's the king coming home with me, but my home, that's not so easy to find, I think." "Oh, never mind," said the cat, "only do you drive after me as I run before." So off they set, first Peter, who drove after his cat, and then the king and all his court. But when they had driven a good bit, they came to a great flock of fine sheep that had wool so long it almost touched the ground. "If you'll only say," said the cat to the shepherd, "this flock of sheep belongs to Lord Peter, when the king asks you, I'll give you this silver spoon," which she had taken with her from the king's palace. Yes, he was willing enough to do that. So when the king came up, he said to the lad who watched the sheep, "Well, I never saw so large and fine a flock of sheep in my life. Whose is it, my little lad?" "Why," said the lad, "whose should it be but Lord Peter's?" A little while after, they came to a great herd of fine brindled kine, who were all so sleek the sun shone from them. "If you'll only say," said the cat to the neat herd, "this herd is the Lord Peter's, when the king asks you, I'll give you this silver ladle." And the ladle, too, she had taken from the king's palace. "Yes, with all my heart," said the neat herd. So when the king came up, he was quite amazed at the fine fat herd, for such a herd he had never seen before. And so he asked the neat herd who owned those brindled kine. "Why, who should own them but Lord Peter?" said the neat herd.